Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Excelsior College online webinar. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm delighted to see that we've got people dialing in from right around Australia, including people that are already studying with Excelsior and people that are just interested in this exciting topic today. So today we'll be looking at From Teacher to Leader, a guide for aspiring leaders and mentors. So really examining the behaviours and best practice in either moving from a teaching role into a leadership role, or for those that are already leaders, mentoring those that are moving on up in school leadership. So thank you for joining us. Before we get started, just a little bit of housekeeping. So we're using GoToWebinar today, and all of the attendees are in listen-only mode. So everyone's on mute. If you do have a question, we'd be delighted to hear from you. Even a comment or an idea would be great. In order to share that, you just need to use the question tab on the GoToWebinar toolbar, which is typically located on the right-hand side. And those of you that have attended one of our webinars before will know that we come through to the questions at the end. So pop them in as we go, and then Dr. Stiles and I will work through those and have a bit of a discussion with you, and we're looking forward to that. Our webinar is also being recorded, so if you've got colleagues that are interested in the topic, or if something comes up this afternoon and you need to jump out, you will receive the webinar recording via email in around 24 hours. And then we also post them to our blog about 2 to 3 weeks after the event, so look out for it on the Excelsior blog. And looking forward to seeing people sharing it with colleagues and interested friends. So we might get started. So my name's Amelia, and I'll be your webinar moderator today. With me, I've got our resident expert, Dr. Peter Stiles, who's got many, many years of teaching experience. He's been the head of English, the director of studies, the director of human resources, and head of middle school in leading independent schools. Peter holds a doctorate in literature and theology from Glasgow University in Scotland, and he studied theology at Regent College, Vancouver, and has been the recipient of many awards. Peter's currently the acting head of the School of Education here at Excelsior College, and we're delighted to hear some of his expert advice today. So welcome, Peter.
Thanks, Amelia.
So what we're going to do in today's session over the next 45 minutes or so is have a look at some of the research that Dr. Stiles has put together about this topic, and he's going to share some insights. There is a reference list available as a handout as well for those that are keen to go through and do some further reading after the session. And then we'll have a look at one way that you can continue on your school leadership career through studying our Master of Education, which, as I said, a number of people on the line are already doing. So I'll talk a little bit about what that looks like, and then at the very end we'll come through to those questions that get typed into the question box. So I hope you enjoy the webinar, and I will hand over to you now, Peter.
Thanks, Amelia. So good afternoon, everyone. It's really delightful to be able to talk to you this afternoon about this topic of aspiring leaders and mentors, a guide for you from teacher to leader. So let's first of all just fill you in a bit about Excelsior College. Excelsior College was established in 1983. Some of you I know are familiar with it. It's been essentially a creative arts institution prior to expanding and becoming having a larger vision and taking in other subjects such as business, education, and counselling. So we have an affiliation with a large American Christian university, Indiana Wesleyan University. That's been a good connection for us because it opens up amazing resources for us as a college. And Excelsior has a long-term vision of moving towards a fully fledged Christian university, which I think would make it the first Protestant Christian university in Australia, which would be fantastic. So that's our purpose, is our long-term goal. Our purpose is to honour God in the things that we do, and we hope that the courses we offer are academically rigorous and stand up to scrutiny all over Australia and across the world, because we do have students studying in different parts of the world other than Australia. And our Master of Education degree is already at this moment being studied by people in Thailand and India and elsewhere. So we like the online delivery mode because it makes it possible for people in remote locations especially to study with us. And it's the Master of Teaching degree, which is our primary teaching degree, is studied by people in quite remote locations all over Australia. And so we open up this possibility to them, and it doesn't seem to be a problem for them because they seem to be able to manage that just as well as if they were coming here onto the campus. Now, some of our courses are offered on campus. We're expanding our offerings within the School of Education, and next year we'll be introducing a Bachelor of Early Childhood, which will be an exciting development for us at Excelsior. So online delivery is not a problem. I think if you engage in it, you'll find it quite refreshing because you don't have to make the move to come to the college once a week or twice a week, which I once had to do, travel from the northern part of Sydney right out to the University of New South Wales to attend classes. You don't have that. You don't have that. You can do it all online on a whiz-bang online site, which has been developed. So that's probably enough about the college. You certainly please go to our website and check it out. It's a good website there for you to explore and have a look at what's on offer at Excelsior College. Right, so we'll move on to the topic, which is From Teacher to Leader, a guide for aspiring leaders and mentors. And I have 6 points that I wanted to just run through quickly with you this afternoon as we focus on this topic. I'm speaking a lot here from readings I've done, but I'm also speaking a lot from my own career, which spans decades now, and observations I've made along the way. So the first one is adopt strategies that will provide a solid foundation for career development. I think this is really important. You have to be quite deliberate in your desire to become a leader, and think ahead. Work towards your long-term career goals. Do you want to go down the pastoral or academic stream, or both? Some people find that a difficult choice, and sometimes you don't have to do either, but it tends, especially in private schools, it tends to split sometimes between purely pastoral and purely academic. I know at one school I worked at, there was a clear distinction between those people who were housemasters, who were obviously still classroom teachers, and those who were focused, like head of department, on the academic aspects of their subject area more. So think about that. Think about what your long-term career goals are. And it's important to take into account your own personality, your own strengths and capabilities. Under God, we're all given strengths, and we're all given gifts that we can utilize in His service. And it's really important that you assess what gifts you have to use most effectively for God. And so it's probably good earlier in your career to just think ahead. What would you like to do? Where would you like to go in your career? And then if you've thought that through, then what do you need to do to prepare yourself for the role to which you aspire? And often that's a question of experience, but it can also be a question of qualification. So are your qualifications sufficient for what you want to do in the future? If you want to teach in a university, then you need a PhD. These days, it's almost impossible to get a job in the tertiary sector without a PhD. So it's kind of like the basic qualification now for someone in that sector. But it may not be for you. If you want to be head of department or you want a different role, it may be sufficient to have a master's degree. So think about, are your qualifications sufficient? And have you had sufficient breadth of experience? Now, this is a tricky one. Have you stayed too long in one place? or move too often? This is a question often gets asked when you look at a CV, which I've done a lot in my career, selecting staff members. Look at the person. Have they stayed too long in the one position? What does that say about that person if they've spent, far too long in the one role? But it can be just equally disadvantageous if you've moved too often. Like if a person moves every year, you might start to become wary of that person's ability to work through situations and make a contribution in the long term after the honeymoon period of settling into the school they're in. So that's important. Think about that. And I know it's a wrench to leave a school. I tried to move every 6 or 7 years for my last appointment, which was much longer than that. And are you capable of assuming any role within the school? That's a good question to ask yourself. I once worked in a school, a prestigious private school, where the headmaster always assumed that every member of his executive could assume any role, could maintain any role within the school. So I could be appointed as head of the junior school, or I could be appointed as director of studies. This flexibility is an important thing to be able to maintain. So think about that. Have you got the flexibility that's necessary for you to move outside your own subject area and to broaden your interest in your capabilities and take on new challenges? That's important. So if a new challenge comes up, are you prepared to step in and take the risk there, the apparent risk of something that you're not very familiar with? And I think that's an important thing to be aware of and to prepare yourself for. Flexibility is really important in assuming leadership. Okay, try the next one now, Amelia. Thank you. So remain flexible. And one of the important things I often think about careers is that you have to be prepared to step down in order to step up. Are you prepared to move to a challenging school to improve your prospects? I once went to a school, I was working with the Department of Education, where I'd prioritized all the schools. It was number 46 on my list of ones I really wanted, but I took the appointment and I haven't regretted it because it opened up other possibilities for me. So you may need to step down theoretically in your own mind, or you may need to go into a country, a rural environment, to be prepared for the role that you ultimately would like, even though that in itself could be a good place to go. But if your aim is to be a headmaster, ahead of that happening with people going interstate or overseas to get the experience they needed to be able to come back and take up a position here in Australia. And I've heard of some notable examples along that line. So going to a country school could be part of that preparedness. And do you need to take time out to study? And perhaps that needs to be overseas studies as well, which will give you an extra string to your bow, an extra degree of credibility. Would your family be prepared to support you in such a change? That's something you may need at some point in your career. If you're going to be a leader, may need to accept that such challenges, such major decisions need to be made at some point or other. And they usually end up, especially if you're a Christian, they usually end up with very positive experiences. And another time I'll tell you the story, my own experience in that regard. So remain flexible and be prepared to step down in order to step up. Perhaps the best example of that I know is the present Archbishop of Canterbury, who's a friend of mine, Justin Welby, who left a high-paying oil managing role off the coast of England to paid megabucks to step down and become a humble ordinand in a theological college, paid almost next to nothing. And because he ultimately wanted to assume a senior position of responsibility within the church, and it worked out really well for him. So he was prepared to make that decision. Okay, next one. Amelia, thank you. Now, maintaining a well-developed, comprehensive resume, I think, is a good thing to do. Construct an attractive, well-designed resume, both a digital and a hard copy. Go the extra step with the presentation. Make it stand out so that when you use it for application purposes, the attention of people is drawn to it because of the color, the paper, the font, whatever, the presentation. That's quite important. A resume is really important. It's a record of your qualifications, your experience, but it's also a way of getting you through the front door so you get the interview. That's the main purpose of a resume, to get the interview. Include the essential elements that someone would need to know about you, your qualifications, your experience, your interests, and make sure you include a good photograph of yourself. Now, it's better if you do this from the outset and have the resume and keep updating it as you go along. Because inevitably, if you don't do that, you will forget things and you'll be rushing at the last minute to construct a resume. And don't undersell yourself, but also don't make too much of too little. It's a difficult balance, but you have to include just those things that are pertinent to the position that you're applying for. So a well-developed resume is a key, I think, to success in terms of leadership. Part of that is also demonstrating an interest in research, which is kind of like the new mantra for teachers. You really have to engage in research, even as a classroom teacher. It's essential to do so now. I can tell you this from meeting with the deans of education. There's a major emphasis on it at all levels now. So list any speaking engagements or opportunities that you've had, and particularly any publications that you've had. I would encourage you to write and encourage you to participate in activities. We'll come to that in a second. Professional development activities. And keep your resume up to date. Every few months, go into it and make sure it's right on the mark, so that you include everything that you think needs to be in there. That doesn't mean you need to use it all, and you will inevitably strip a lot of that out depending on the position that you're applying for, and vary the resume according to the context, which is really important. I get a lot of people come to me and ask me about resumes, especially for particular contexts. Maybe some of them are not non-Christian contexts. Then we use a different resume for if the same person were to apply for a position in a Christian school, a senior position. Quite a different situation. What it has to do is get you through the front door of the school and get the interview. That's the principal reason you construct it. And also, it's a wonderful record of your career. Okay, the fourth point, please, Amelia. Now, this one's really, I think, to be a leader, this is really, really important, and that's build social capital for yourself within your community. Be liked, be respected. Now, being a teacher is a whole person commitment. Make sure you have good credibility in the community at large. It's really important. I often use the illustration of a teacher I had at school who really didn't have much credibility because we used to find him quite intoxicated in the street when you passed by him late in the evening or in the late afternoon. Terrible. His credibility was shot because of his behavior outside the school. So you need to maintain your credibility in the community and do all that is reasonable to contribute to your school community. And we know that overcommitment can be a trap. And I often advise first-year out teachers, young teachers going out, don't overcommit. It can be an absolute trap, and you'll end up having periods of illness and sickness because of it. But don't, on the other hand, stay within the confines of your own staff room. That's another trap too. And I've seen that happen in schools, this kind of fortress mentality where people only mix with the people in their subject area or in their staff room or their year level. That can equally be unhelpful for you in the long term. So my next point is quite simply avoid partisanship within your school. Don't favour some colleagues over others. Don't favour one part of the school to another, and retain that flexibility I was speaking about before. If you're in the junior school, go into the senior school and visit them there. If you're in the senior school, make an effort to go down and visit people in the prep school. I think that's quite important to be able to move freely between different parts of the school. Now, I can't stress this next one enough, which is be loyal, very loyal to your employer and your senior staff. I always think the major objective, responsibility you have as a staff member in any context where you're working as an educator is loyalty to the school and to your head and deputy head. And part of that is working cooperatively to support the mission statement of the school in which you work. And that's really assumed for anybody that's going to become a leader, that you don't gossip, that you don't white-hand, that you constructively add to the success of the school by always being loyal and supportive of it. Now, you know as well as I know that this is not easy always, but it's really, really important to do it the best you can in that sense, especially within a Christian school context. All right, the next one, Amelia, which is maintain a good understanding of current trends in education. Now, this is not easy because not only do you have to maintain expertise in your own subject area, and that, of course, is really critical, but that you can reach outside your own discipline and gain a general understanding of current trends in education as well. And so a good thing to do is to join an organisation like the Australian College of Educators, ACE, or similar organisation, but that's probably the best one for Australians to join, and to attend some of the sessions and conferences and afternoons that they run. That will open doors for you. It's a good networking opportunity and will give you the capacity to meet other people, which sometimes is difficult when you're in one school, just working in a school, to meet people right across the spectrum of educational endeavour. So that's one way of doing that, is to join an organisation like the Australian College of Educators. Another one would be to undertake a higher degree in education, which is obvious from my point of view, that's something you would do. And really the Master of Education degree is kind of core business for success in schools. When I was employing people in my previous school, I would always appreciate the amount of effort that had been put into studying for high degrees, because it represented not only effort but expanded understanding and knowledge. So a Master of Education degree, as I said, is kind of like the core degree for someone who wants to progress in their career. And then I think the other thing is to attend conferences and to present papers and write articles, as I said before. Get out and about and take a vibrant, strong interest in some aspect of education that you're really keen on, whether it be in your subject area or not. That's really important. And then finally, I've gone to point 6, Amelia. Thank you. The last point really is assist others to transition from teacher to leader. Now, I know that this is the nice thing about teachers, is they're generally very collegial people. They're not selfish about their ambition, not selfish about their achievements. And I think the best leaders and the best people aspiring to leadership are those who foster leadership amongst those they work with. And yeah, I have to mention one particular educator here, and I've given you some details of his work at the end. Mr. Rod West, who was principal of Trinity Grammar School, where I was head of middle school prior to my time there, but he did teach my son, was the most amazing leader in that sense. He was probably the most amazing headmaster I've ever worked with in terms of encouraging leadership within his staff. And many of his staff members, during the 20 years he was headmaster at Trinity, which is a long time, he have become headmasters themselves, and a lot of them are situated in fairly prestigious schools around Sydney. So he was humbly encouraged others to aspire to leadership in a wonderful way that I've never seen a better example of. And as I said, good leaders are pleased to see their staff succeed, even if it ultimately means replacing them when they move to other positions. Now, you'll see this sometimes. You'll see examples of this from leaders. They selfishly hang on to the people they have. But anyone who's thinking basically of not only the institution for which they work, but also the welfare of the teachers that are working in that institution will always want their staff members to succeed and to move to higher positions if that's what they aspire to. So something for you to encourage in others. And of course, every job within a school, every teaching role has a leadership dimension to it. And no one in this is assuming that when you're a classroom teacher, you're not a leader, because of course you are, but depends what your ultimate career goals. We're talking more about career goals in this discussion. And that leads me to the last point here, which is ensure that you have a good understanding of what true leadership really is. True leadership is not just a matter of positional authority. It's a matter of giving others the capability to realize their own potential and to facilitate that process, whatever the process is that leads people towards self-realization. That's really essentially, I think, what leadership is all about. Setting an example, but also making it possible for others to move forward with you into whatever roles they seek. And some good work around this. Peter Stiles, I've given you a reference to his work. Peter Stiles really nails that whole concept of leadership, which is partly servant leadership anyway. But I think you'd find his work really interesting. And he lives in the Blue Mountains, just west of Sydney, and he runs the Leadership Centre up there. Now, Amelia, maybe move on to the reference list, if you would. So I just put in the reference list some of the books that I thought that you would find helpful and interesting. And the slide hasn't gone up yet, Amelia, but are you still there? Okay. Move on to the reference
Hey, you're right.
list, please.
I think it should be up.
Yeah, I have, yeah. Yeah, move on to the reference list now. Okay. What happened?
Is it up?
I just lost power here, so I'm just going to talk about it, okay? I don't know why. So, yeah, so the references on my list are Howard Gardner. I think you'll find interesting because that book contains a really excellent section on lifelong learning. A recent publication, the one by Kane Goodler, John Collier, and Tony George. Tony George has just become the principal of the King's School, which is the oldest private school in Australia. That's a really useful resource. This is a very useful collection of essays by prominent Christian educators in Australia, and a valuable resource for every school. I've given you a reference by Peter Stiles and others called Rethinking Leadership, which just recently been published. And I think if you're thinking about concepts around leadership, then this volume encompasses some of the best approaches to that whole issue of leadership. And Jack Mesereau, a book there by Jack Mesereau, one of many that he's written around the topic of adult learning, and that includes some wonderful discussion of transformation, how that can take place in a classroom setting and for anybody really. It's predominantly aimed at an adult audience. And then finally, I put down the only book that Roderick West ever wrote, which is this one, The Heart of Education. It's really well worth a read because it talks a lot about this gentleman who I can honestly say is the most exemplary educator I've ever worked with, and some of the struggles that he encountered along the way and how he finally triumphed and became such a successful headmaster that children and staff just adored him. And he died about 12 months ago. I was at his funeral, and there were 3,000 people at the school at his funeral, and a lot of the old boys, the former students of the school, were in tears, as were staff. Most remarkable man. I really recommend that book. He didn't find it easy at times, but he did push through. He had an epiphanic sort of experience when he was in the Greek islands that changed his whole approach to education, which then became very centered around the welfare of his individual students, and noting and paying close attention to them as individuals and what they could achieve, and an amazing leader. So there we go. So that's about it, Amelia. I don't know if we're ready for questions.
Yeah, that's great.
I've completely lost power here, so you can just tell me what they are.
How about leadership tip 101, keep your laptop charged?
Oh, it's charged. It's charged. It's just the power's gone out, that's all. So,
oh, wow. Okay. All right. So for anyone that is interested in continuing doing some research into trends in education and looking at going ahead and doing some of that further reading, the readings are available in the handout tab in the toolbar on the right-hand side. So I encourage you to download the handout and go and have a read. Some of those sound really like great, insightful reads about leadership generally and about leadership in education, including for those that are already in leadership positions and mentoring others on their journey through their career, and those that are on the line that are looking at what's the next step for you as a teacher and a leader in education. So one of the things that Peter touched on briefly was further study. So I just wanted to give a brief overview of the relevant further study option with Excelsior College, which is our online Master of Education. So this is the degree for people that are practicing teachers who are looking to further their career and extend on their teaching practice. It's an 8-unit degree, so it'll take you around about 16 months in a part-time online delivery. And as we covered earlier, Excelsior College at its heart has a Christian mission, so faith-based learning is at the core of the Master of Education. At the same time, we've got a lot of practical and skill-based learning. You can definitely apply the assessments to what you're seeing in your current classroom or education setting. And we do offer 2 specialisations. So if you want to become an expert in leadership, then the leadership specialisation's for you. For those that are interested in teaching and learning and thinking about going down that career path, then the teaching and learning specialisation would be a great fit. But the enrolment advisor team can talk you through which one might be the best option for the sorts of roles that you're looking to get into and the sort of study that you want to do. So with that online delivery, I just wanted to call out the ability to do that degree while working full-time. So we do know that teachers are busy people, and you've got a busy job and a busy life, and when you're doing a further study postgraduate qualification, it's really, it can be a little different to school leavers studying and looking at how to find the time. So what we do is 100% online delivery. So while you're most welcome to come down to our beautiful campus in Macquarie Park in Sydney, you actually could be based anywhere in Australia and don't need to set foot on campus or make the time to travel to study. So you can study from wherever you are. All of the learning environment is built mobile device friendly. So some people even find time when they're out and about or on public transport, or if you're waiting for your child to do basketball training, then if you've got an iPad with you, you can go ahead and do some of the reading and watch some of the videos in the learning environment. So it can be a good way to balance the study around the rest of your life. In that learning environment, you will be able to build a network. So a lot of people are keen to kind of learn a little bit about different teaching environments and get to know some of your peers while you're studying, and you will get the opportunity to do that in our interactive learning environment. So you can chat with other students throughout the day and make comments about the upcoming assessment or get some guidance from the facilitator about different concepts. But there's definitely a great online community that evolves around the Master of Education. And that's supported by a student success advisor. So that's a non-academic support person that will reach out to you for things like how to access the library, making sure you've got access to the learning environment, checking that you know about all the different services that you might need when you've not been at university for quite a number of years. So the student success advisor is allocated to you for the life of the degree, on top of all the regular academic support that we provide. Just finally, about fees. So if you're thinking about how to fit this around different financial situations, if you're eligible for fee help's available. So there's a bit more information on the government website about fee help, but it's essentially a government loan, so you can defer the payments through the tax system. And we do have 6 intakes each year. So the next one's coming up in January. If you're interested in commencing study or looking at those different options and entry requirements, our enrolment advisors will be more than happy to speak to you about that. And just finally, if an information session such as this one is of interest to some of your colleagues, we'd be more than happy to look at running some information sessions in your school. So we could look at either delivering some insight like we have today, where we talk about an education relevant topic, or perhaps just talk about the degree if you've got a number of people that are thinking about further study and you want to facilitate their knowledge and interest in that study. So reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to talk to you about some options, and we've been quite successful lately in engaging lots of different teachers over morning tea to talk about study and education. So I look forward to hearing from you about that. Now, if anyone does have some questions, I can see a couple of questions have come through, which is great. We'll come through to those now. So the first question, and thanks very much to Chris for waiting so patiently. Chris asks, as a classroom teacher, I'm looking at strengthening the skills, my skills as a leader of students. Do you have any insight on this? So in terms of leading the students instead of the teachers, Peter, did you have any ideas on how that might look in the classroom?
No, I totally understand that position, and I think that's an admirable position to be wanting to strengthen the leadership skills of your students as well. And I really, to be quite honest, couldn't point you in a better direction than to the work of Peter Caldor. He talks a lot about that. And Peter has worked quite extensively in schools and here in Sydney and around the world, actually. So I would point you in that direction because he has material that I think you'd really appreciate if you're talking about improving the leadership skills of your students. Yeah, that's probably the best advice I can give you, and it'll overturn a lot of preconceptions about what leadership really is, because it really, as I said, it's really not about positional authority, but rather utilising, equipping students to see that everyone has strengths, whether you're a captain of the chess club or working in the canteen or whatever you're doing. that should be considered equally as significant as whether you're captain of the first 11 or first 15 in your school. So I'd really point you to Peter Caldor's work. Thank you.
Great. Thanks. That's a great response, Peter. And yeah, I'm really hoping that people download the reference list as a handout. There is also a Master of Education brochure there, but the reference list to go and get that further reading to continue keeping on top of the trends in education. We've got another question here, Peter. Are there units in the Master of Education that address leaders as mentors? So I think that question's about, is there anything in the degree that kind of talks about coaching other staff?
Not specifically on that, but I know that question's about certainly mentoring is an important aspect of being a leader within a school context. So yeah, I'm not sure. I don't think so. It's more the units in the MEd will be more theoretical in nature, but they will have real life examples built into them. But whether they address, I just cannot recall off the top of my head whether they address the issue of mentoring. And I know what your question is, where they're coming from, because that can be a really useful mechanism within a school. Several schools I've worked in, we've used mentors, older students with younger students. Has worked really well in one school I worked in, where we had older students within the school assigned to younger students to help them, and there are specific programs around that. I think you just go and investigate, because there are some really good programs in that area. Thank you.
Great. And a final question, unless there's any more coming through. Did you have any advice on how to mentor a reluctant leader, like somebody temporarily stepping into a management role?
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah, and I think that happens to everybody. I think, it's just a matter of encouraging people to see that every challenge is an opportunity, really. So if you come into a hard environment, then try and encourage people to think proactively about and metacognitively about what am I here for? What am I doing? And what can I do? What's the best I can do in this situation? We've been in, all of us, I'm sure, have been in tough situations where we've thought that very thing, how do I deal with this? This is not where I want to be necessarily. This is too tough. But then how can I turn that to advantage? How can I demonstrate from this that I'm capable of working in this context? I have been in situations like that, I can assure you. And a lot of people I know have been in situations where they felt, I'm not sure this is really what I want to do. Well, you have to assess that, I know, but you also need to work through that and help people to understand, okay, this is difficult, but it won't last forever. It may be transitional to something better if you're struggling with this position. And maybe you'll come to like it anyway, which is often the case. There's not one school I've worked in where ultimately I didn't leave the school in tears because I was so sad to leave the students and the teachers. But I didn't necessarily start every school feeling like that. So I think you just stand beside people, encourage and spend time with them. Take them for coffees, go for walks with them, encourage them to look at the positive side of the whole thing, cup half full, not cup half empty situation. And you can come through these things. And, I think, there's things like situations like that where the person's struggling, that can really advance their career. If you looked at Rod West's autobiography, for example, you would see many examples of that. Places he didn't want to be, things he didn't want to, situations he didn't really want to confront, but he made the best of it. So that's probably my advice on that issue. Thanks, Amelia.
Perfect. Well, I think that's all we'll have time for today in terms of questions. But I wanted to thank everyone for sharing their questions and for giving up a little bit of their afternoon to learn a little bit from Dr. Peter Stiles. And Peter, I wanted to thank you for sharing the research and the reading and the insight that you've developed over your career.
Thanks, Amelia. It's always nice to work with you.
Thank you. For those people on the line, a little survey will pop up at the end. And one of the questions I'm particularly keen to hear your thoughts on is other topics that you'd love to see the team here at Excelsior, whether it's Peter or myself or others, talk about in our next webinar. We absolutely take that on board. So if there is a topic that you'd like to see us talk about, then go ahead and pop it in the survey and I'll see what I can do. But thanks very much for attending and have a great afternoon.
Thanks, guys. It was really nice to talk to you, even though I couldn't